Hello and welcome. Today on the bench we have something very different. I believe this is pronounced KKSevens, but correct me if I'm wrong. It's the only way I can think of to pronounce it. They graciously sent me their new 1300 watt induction heater. Now this is for removing rusty nuts and bolts. Living here in the Rust Belt of New Hampshire and doing my own automotive work, I'm very, very familiar with having to remove extremely rusty bolts, nuts and bolts. And my favorite method to date has been using the blue wrench or the gas axe, whichever you want to call it. That's the cutting torch attachment. Don't necessarily use it to cut, but that tip is an excellent way to turn, a good sized nut. You can get it bright orange, and after you've done that, they usually just spin right off. You can lean on them all you want. I've broken ratchets trying to get them loose before, but if you heat them up till right past red into the orange range, they'll usually spin right off afterwards. But this is supposed to do the job without any flame. When you're working with the torch, you got to be real careful. Working around fuel lines, brake lines, wiring harnesses, so on and so forth. You've got to be very creative sometimes in how you're going to get the flame in there without destroying a whole bunch of the rest of the vehicle. This eliminates that problem if it works well, and some people swear at these and some people swear by them, but they sent me the entire kit, and they sent me the big one, and I have to thank them. I'm sure I will find many uses for this. Let's slide this thing out and see what we've got. This is the big kit. This is the one that has two of all of the accessories to go along with it. Yeah, boy, that's quite the latch. Come on. Boy, that one's tight. There we go. Got the instruction manual. We've got the heater itself. Boy, that's a beast. You could club somebody and take them out real quick with that thing. Not that I recommend doing that. We've got two of each size coil. These are for big bolts, big nuts. These are for smaller ones, so they can get right around it. And again, there's a pair of those. There's a pair of this intermediate size. They were very, very generous. So this should cover pretty much the range of nuts and bolts you'll run into. These are, so if you have to get around something, let's say you had like fittings, coupling on a brake line that was rusted and you wanted to get it out, you just wrap this, slip this over the brake line and then just coil it around a couple of times. And it looks like most of these 1, 2, 4 turns, 3 turns. From the looks of these, the turns vary and the diameters vary, which means the inductance is going to vary. So unlike the homebrew inductive heater that I made, I've got a video online about that I use for my solder pot. I can completely liquefy. It's a pot. It's bigger than this cup, and if this is solid solder, I can have it liquid in less than a minute. It's molten in less than a minute. But I just might take to using this instead because it's going to take up a lot less room. These are the nuts evidently to hold the coils in. And I'm going to take a brief look at the manual here real quick. Okay, I've looked briefly at the manual, and there's all kinds of dire warnings in there about not wearing any jewelry. It says take any rings you have on off because it'll heat them up almost instantly. Now, I don't know if they're being overcautious here, having never used one of these. Usually there's nothing going on except out here at the business end. You know, when you've got a coil plugged into it, typically all your heating takes place in here. But this obviously doesn't rely on the coils to be resonant. I'm assuming they've got, you know, an oscillator in here running at a fixed frequency, and maybe there's enough RF leakage out of this handle to cause problems. The first couple times I play with this, I'm going to err on the side of caution, because nothing would be worse than having my wedding ring suddenly decide it's going to go incandescent on my finger. I don't think it'd get that hot on my finger, but it certainly could give you a burn. A friend of mine reached down on his motorcycle one time and got his wedding ring between the positive terminal of the battery and ground, and he had a nasty burn all the way around his finger. And I mean, it was like that from the battery shorting out. So I've taken them off, and I'll do some experiments. In fact, I think I'll put a coil. Let me get some junk before we move out to the garage and try it on something rusty. I'll do some experimenting here in the house and see if it is actually dangerous to have my rings in the vicinity of the unit. In fact, they go so far as to say you shouldn't have metal buckles on your belt. You shouldn't have, you know, metal buttons on your shirt. And I believe they're just erring on the side of, you know, making sure they don't get sued. If somebody sets their shirt on fire, they can say, well, it was in the manual. I find it hard to believe that that's going to be an issue, but we'll find out. We'll do some tests here. Okay, I found a metal plate and a 1/2 inch nut and bolt. I'm not going to just try doing a bolt with a nut on it because there's no thermal mass there. Even my little homemade unit should be able to heat up that nut to pretty much red. But the trick's going to be, can it do it in the car when you've got like a 1/2 inch bolt up against the frame member where it's pulling all the heat away? So I figure this is a little bit better test than just doing a nut and bolt. We will see how long it takes to get this thing hot. If I can get it good and red, then I think it's got a fair enough chance of working on a bolt in the car. These are 11 gauge copper wire, solid copper wire, it appears. They're 0.091 inches in diameter, which works out. 0.091 is 11 gauge, or 2.31 millimeters. I would think a number 10 wire would work just as well, which is only 102 thousandths. A number 12 is smaller. The wire might heat up quite a bit. Number 12 is 0.081 or 2.06 millimeters, and a number 10 is 102 or 2.59. 11 gauge isn't a common gauge, at least not here in the US. But 12 and 10 are very easily found just about everywhere. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pretend I'm trying to get at this inside the car, and I can't get straight on it, you know, coming down straight in from it. So I'm going to bend the coil, which is acceptable practice for these, and pretend I'm coming in from the side, and we should be able to heat that nut up, hopefully. Now when you turn this thing on, the fan immediately starts running. That's so that when you're using it, the fan is always cooling. If it was relying on you holding the button to keep the thing, you know, as soon as you let it go, if it was hot in there, the heat would stay. But it's set up so that the fan runs continuously, and it only heats when the button's pressed. So first thing I'm going to do with no rings on, we'll see how it does heating up this 1/2 inch nut against this metal plate, which is Looks like to be about a 3/16 inch thick plate, so it's a pretty heavy gauge piece of steel. There's the fan, and I've got the button down, and we'll see how it does. It's starting to smoke already. I'll probably set off the smoke alarm. Now, by now, that would be bright red using an acetylene torch. But again, you know, if you're working near the gas tank or near a wiring harness, okay, it's changing color. And it sure smells hot. I want to see if it'll get red. Boy, it's smoking up a storm. I don't think it's going to turn red. I've got a feeling this plate is sucking up too much of the heat. In fact, it's getting pretty warm over here. Yeah, it's getting too hot to touch there. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to turn it red. Well, let's turn this light out and see what it looks like. Okay, it's dull cherry red. It is dull red. Got a little work light, as you can probably see. Okay, it's starting to turn good and red now. Now, a acetylene torch would certainly be a lot faster, but this is doing the job. It's slower, but it's safer. Yeah, that's starting to glow pretty good. I'm just going to keep going. Oh, the coil's starting to get red. I don't know if you can see the center turns of the coil are red. I think that's about as hot as it's going to get it. And you can see the red starting to fade. Won't be able to put that on the bench. I would think that would work. Not quite up to torch standards. Now I'm going to hold my ring here and see if my ring gets hot. We got the button down again. And I'm going to get closer to the tip. Okay, that's what I thought. I assumed when I read that they were just trying to protect themselves from lawsuits. I think you'll be absolutely fine as long as you don't get your ring near the business end of that coil. You'll be okay. As long as you stay away from the wires themselves. Don't reach up there with your other hand to do something when the thing is on if you have a ring on that finger. But yeah, my ring's not even going above room temperature. Right now out in the garage it is unbelievably warm. And I'm not in the mood right now. I'll go out later. We'll continue a little bit later. I'll get underneath the truck and see if I can find some good rusty nut that won't turn. It's throwing quite a bit of heat out of that heat sink of the unit itself. But it didn't overheat. It does say the light will turn red if it overheats. And you just wait a few minutes for it to cool down. Whoa, yeah, that's pretty toasty. I guess the advantage of the torch is you're in and out a lot quicker. and you don't have as much area heating. You just heat the nut up till it's, you know, within a few seconds it's bright orange and you can spin it off. But again, if you're working near a wiring harness, a brake line, a fuel line, the fuel tank, rubber hoses, you know, some areas can get pretty tight. And this looks like it'd be the ideal tool to get in there and get the job done. So, as far as wearing your jewelry, that's up to you. I know now that I'm going to feel okay. Just stay away from the business end of the coil. I don't recommend doing that. For you, I recommend following the instructions. How's that? We'll keep things safe. Okay, and I did just notice something, and it was something I read about in the reviews. I'm assuming this is fiberglass tubing. As it cools, it's flaking off. I'm hearing a little ticking sounds, and pieces of that are chipping off. And if the coils are touching, it's not going to operate properly. They've got to be insulated from one another and from the workpiece. So it looks like these definitely are consumables. Yeah, you can see the pieces of the stuff falling off as this thing cools. So I think I'm going to look for a source of this fiberglass tubing material, webbing material, I don't know what to call it, sleeving I guess would be the right term, so that I'll have that on hand, so that if I don't have a usable coil I can re-insulate it. If you were going to be using this every day in the garage, if you had a business, I think you're going to want to back this up. Yeah, this stuff is just flaking off like crazy now as it cools. And I think you're going to want to have an acetylene torch in the shop along to back this up. But for those times when you can't use the torch, you can't get in there safely with the torch, you can certainly go in and do the job with this. And again, I'll get out there tomorrow when it's a little cooler, and we'll get underneath the truck, because my truck's plenty rusty, and see what we can find and try and loosen up. Okay, instead of hauling the car out, getting it up on jack stands and trying to climb underneath and video under there, I thought I'd test this thing out on my 30-plus-year-old snowblower here. This thing has seen many, many, many New England winters, and here in New Hampshire they salt the roads, and then when the plow truck goes by, it mounds up a snowbank in front of your driveway and in front of your property. Everybody's lawn here for the first 2 feet is dead in the springtime from the salt. But when you're clearing out that berm at the end of the driveway, it's just heavily laden with salt, and these things take a lot of punishment. And this has a lot of very angry looking hardware that we're going to give this thing a try on. Now, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, this thing starts. This hasn't been used in 4 years because I've been living in Thailand in the winters. But I just hauled it out, put fresh gas in the tank, one pull, and it runs, started right up. And it does that because every time I shut this thing down and every time I put it away, I turn off the fuel tap, open the throttle, and I run the carburetor dry. So every time you go to start this, you got a fresh charge, or a charge of fresh fuel in the float bowl. And 30 years on, this thing starts in the first pull, and it gets yearly oil changes when it's being used. Oh, one other thing. I picked up some fiberglass sleeving to use on the coils. The coils are considered consumables, just like your welding rod is a consumable, and your acetylene and gas, they're consumables. But rather than buy a $60 kit of new coils, I should be able to slide fresh sleeving over it. So let me get set up here and we'll see how well this works. Okay, I've got a couple of fairly angry looking ones here, and oh, that one turned. Okay, that wouldn't be a good candidate. We'll leave that one alone. Let's try this one. No, I can't move that at all. In fact, I can tell it's starting to round out. So let's give that one a go. I'm going to use one of the smaller coils. And we'll see what happens here. We got some smoke coming out. I'm going to try to get it red. And I'm not seeing any red yet. You can see the coil discoloring, so something is happening in there. Oh yes, the nut's red now. There we go. Let's get it good and bright. Okay, that ought to come off. Let's see what happens. Oh, piece of cake. Nice and loose. We'll just leave that on there and we'll give another one a go. There's a very, very angry looking shear bolt right here, which hasn't moved in years. Boy, that one's really looking bad. Let's see what happens. Just gonna let it get good and hot. Sorry about the fan noise. Wow, my wrench is hot. Okay, she's starting to glow. I don't know if you can catch it in the camera. I'm going to let it get good and red. And it's going orange now. Yeah, that's really getting hot. Okay, let's see what we got. Oh yeah. Loose as can be. Work like a charm. I'm going to snug that back up and leave it in place. No need to change it. So I guess that's the proof. It does work. And that was one of the angriest looking nuts on this machine. So, if you bear in mind, sorry about the fan noise, that's just part of the operation of this unit. Bear in mind, these are consumables. And I don't know if this one's going to start flaking off like the other one did. The other one, we really gave it a workout on a 1/2 inch bolt and nut. And you can see the insulation's flaked off there. Now this is still usable because there's still fiberglass between the coils. But you can always pick up that's 9 or 10 feet of sleeving there that was only like $6 or something on Amazon, and just slip new sleeving over it and you could reuse these. A set of all new coils is about $59. Somebody in a garage might just want to go ahead and buy them for the home gamer, or you have a little extra time, you can go ahead and repair your own. That's probably cooled down enough to unplug it now. There we go. And yeah, the fiberglass is flaking off. I can hear little ticking noises as it chips off the coils as it cools down. But, was that in focus? You can see. Again, these are consumables. One word of warning: be careful about cleaning up the pieces after they flaked off. It's like handling fiberglass insulation. I scooped them up in my hands and my fingers itched for the next 2 hours from the little pieces of fiberglass that get in your skin. So just be aware of that. But if you're working in an area where it's hazardous to use a torch, this will do the job. And I want to thank KKSevens for sending this over for a review. It will certainly see some use on my rusty old 20-year-old Dodge truck, and it's going to come in handy. Be very useful tool. So that wraps it up. Well worth the money if you're in need of getting rusty nuts and bolts and you don't have a place to use the torch, or you don't have a torch. For most work, I would still reach for the blue wrench, the oxyacetylene, but in places where that's not feasible, this will do. Oh, yeah, I hear tick. It's chipping off little pieces of fiberglass from that coil as it cools. That's it. Thanks for stopping by. If you want one of these, you can contact KKSevens, or you can get them on Amazon, and they work as advertised. Take care. See you soon. I'm the radio mechanic. Bye-bye.